Hey, qué rollo, amigos de Multimedia GDL. Yo soy Pani y a continuación vamos a entrar al conjunto de artes escénicas porque vamos a presenciar la Masterclass de Scott Derrickson. Acompáñenos porque va a estar sumamente interesante.
Y el día de hoy viene a presentar su nueva película, El teléfono negro, que ya el 23 de junio llega a todos los cines del país. Así que amigos, démosle la bienvenida y un fuerte aplauso, por favor, a Scott Derrickson. Scott.
I would agree, it's definitely the most emotional movie that I've made. I didn't necessarily set out for it to be that way, but because it's so personal, I think it just ended up becoming so emotional. A lot of what's in the movie, came directly from my own childhood, and childhood memories, and childhood experiences. But also, when you have lead actors who are children, especially children as good as these two actors are, everything becomes emotionally heightened.
Yes.
So the movie, to be honest, is I knew it would be emotional. I didn't think it would be as emotional as it actually turned out. I didn't do anything with Madeline. Again, I felt like I read the scenes through with her one time and gave her probably some notes. But honestly, she really embodied that character and I think just really understood how to do almost every scene innately. And I can tell some amazing stories about surprising things that she did while we were shooting. In the case of Mason, because it was the weight of the movie is on him.
Yeah.
He's the one who you're stuck in that basement with all that time, and I just had the two of them do the scenes. And what I did is I could talk to Mason like an adult. So we would read through the scenes, and then I would go through each beat of the scene, and I would talk to him about it emotionally. And I said, now remember. And he would write notes. And I said, remember, this is what he's thinking in the scene. He's got to be thinking this, he's feeling this way. And I would sort of just give him that basic information. And he took notes down for all of that. And we did that with every scene in the movie over sort of a four-day session, four times for maybe 2 hours a day. And then when he came to set, he had it all down. Madeline, Mason, and Ethan, my directing, I would get a lot of credit for the acting in this movie. It was great casting.
Yeah.
My directing was mostly great, just slower. Great, louder. It was things like that, But they're so good, all three. In Sinister, Vincent D'Onofrio, who's friends with Ethan Hawke, really did Ethan a favor and did the one scene that he's in Sinister where he kind of comes, he's an occult expert, he's on Zoom,
Yeah.
and he shows up and explains everything. Well, he did that for free. He was just the best guy, and he just called me one day about a week before the shoot and said, he said, yeah, I just want to see if there's anything I need to know. I said, no, just do it. He goes, I just have one request. I said, okay. He goes, can I wear a Pink Floyd shirt? And I said, if they'll give me the right, sure. So we contacted them, and they were like, no problem. And then in Doctor Strange, of course, in the opening driving scene, just before the crash, is a Pink Floyd song from their early era, which they sent back a message saying to tell the director they were really happy that I was using something from the old Syd Barrett era, from the first album, from Pirates at the Gates of Dawn. In Black Phone, we didn't have the budget for that track. It's from Dark Side of the Moon. It's their most popular record. Those songs are very expensive, but we just put in a request and offered the most that we could pay, and they said yes.
Amazing.
So they've been really great to me. I think that it's a way of paying respect to the things that inspired you, and they're a band that has made a difference in my life. So being able to give them a presence through my body of work has meaning for me. Sinister was $3 million. That was our budget for Sinister. It was a very low budget movie. The Black Phone budget is $18 million. For real, that's how much we actually spent, including $1 million of the COVID costs. So it was a $17 million movie, and we didn't go over budget. We spent that.
You're still filming in the middle of the pandemic, or
Yeah.
was it hot?
It was in early, I I guess it was meant early 2021, so we were pretty much in the heart of it. Then, you know, Doctor Strange is, you know, over 200 million. Here's the thing. They all have the same problem. Filmmaking is always the same. You don't have enough time and you don't have enough money. Every time. You know, no matter what your budget is. And so there's something about the process of filmmaking that it's just like a glass that you have to fill with your budget, and you're gonna want more water in the glass no matter what. It's gonna flow over a little bit. But I've been fortunate though, because like the 3 movies that I mentioned, I did finish them all 3 on time and on budget, and I got everything that I wanted. And the thing that is difficult, and I've seen filmmakers really go through this, and I think I had seen it happen enough that I was able to avoid it, is to not say yes to a movie that where the budget was not enough to do justice to the script. Yes. You know, I mean, I think the first Hellraiser movie that I made, a direct-to-video movie, was a little bit like that. It was like a $1.5 million direct-to-DVD movie, but it was written like a $30 million special effects movie, you know? But we did pretty good. But I think it's important to, you know, to not try to make something, you know, that's bigger on the page than you have the budget for. It's much better to write it smaller, you know, and shrink the movie down to fit the budget than it is to try to stretch your money. Because that's when weaknesses start to show. I read Joe's short story, Joe Hill, who's Stephen King's son, published the story about 17 or 18 years ago. And I had breakfast with a friend of mine, and I walked up the street to a bookstore, and I went to the horror section, and they had the new horror books. And there was only maybe a dozen new horror books, and the book was called 20th Century Ghosts. It was an anthology of short stories. So I picked it up, I looked at it, didn't know who Joe Hill was, and I read the first story. And the first story is called Best New Horror. And I thought, man, this writer has something. He's got some confidence to name his first short story Best New Horror. But when I read it, it was one of the best horror shorts I've ever read. In fact, I just recently optioned that story and have another writer working on a script for it. And so I bought the book. I thought that story was amazing. I bought the book and I went home, and every story in that book, it's now published under the name The Black Phone because of the movie. Every story is great. But The Black Phone, which was one of the shorter stories, really stood out to me as a movie. And what lodged in my head after reading it was, you know, it doesn't have an elaborate relationship with the sister. There's only one dead victim instead of 5. You know, there's no home life for the kid really. So there's a lot of things that we expanded. But the basic idea about a kid being abducted, put in a basement where there's a black phone and a previous victim calls him, all from the short story. Here's the thing I realized. I kept thinking, this feels like a movie to me. This feels like, and it took me years to figure out what a simple, brilliant thing Joe did in that story. And what he did was he combined 2 major horror genres in one short story. And I didn't even realize it until years after reading it, that he took a story that was both a serial killer story and a ghost story, and put them together in one little short story that takes place in the basement. And I think that's when I started to think, this needs to be a movie.
But most studio executives, in my experience, have a certain number of things, certain categories of things that they just expect to be there. Every character's got to have a backstory.
Like a list.
Yeah, every character's got to have a backstory. Specifically, you know, why are they the way they are? And that really needs to be true with bad guys, you know? And I'm very resistant to that, you know? I think that when you're talking about genuinely evil behavior, there's mystery in evil. There's mystery to it. And what I do know about some of the real monsters that have become, you know, public figures, Ted Bundy, for example, he had a happy childhood. Now, he had some weird things that happened, but he wasn't beaten, he wasn't traumatized, he wasn't caught in a cycle of violence. He was born bad.
Yes.
There was something really wrong with that guy from the beginning. To give him a backstory that tries to explain the horrendous things he did is a disservice to the truth. And at the same time, you know, take it somebody like, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker in Los Angeles, definitely went through a lot of abuse as a child. I think he was part of that cycle of violence. But there are a lot of people who go through extreme abuse and come out of that as adults as very good people. So this whole idea that your backstory has to define your present actions is not true in life, and it's not true in cinema. And when it comes to villains especially, mystery is more powerful than knowledge. Does anybody here really want to know Heath Ledger's Joker when he says, "Do you want to know how I got these scars?" No, tell me a lie. It's way more interesting.
I think that's why a Joker is just a compelling.
He's a compelling character because he makes me think, God, what happened to that guy?
Yes.
And that engages me more. I mean, imagine how terrible it would be if there was a scene where Clarice Starling is reading a report about why Hannibal Lecter eats people. I'd be like, well, that ruined that guy. So you have to have a willingness to let mystery, play. But I think can also be true for protagonists. I don't think that, and I think backstories can be very good. Backstories can be very useful. Ethan Hawke's Sinister has a real backstory that Fred Thompson, the sheriff, lays out in the first scene in the movie. Like, he and that sheriff have a conversation where all kinds of backstory information comes out, and that was important for that character, and that was important for that story. But sometimes, even for a protagonist, even for the hero of the story, all you need to know is what you watch them do. They are defined by what they do. And here's what I'll say one more thing, since this is really a class on filmmaking, on cinema. Especially this is for any writers out there, for anybody out there who wants to be a writer, wants to be a director. Your characters in a movie, and this is, again, true in life, and true in fiction, true in screenplays. People are not who they say they are.
Y bueno, amigos de Multimedia GDL, vamos saliendo de la Masterclass. Y bueno, este personajazo que es Scott Derrickson nos habló un poco más acerca de su película nueva, The Black Phone. Y bueno, en toda la Masterclass también estuvo hablándonos un poco acerca de su trayectoria, como películas como El exorcismo de Emily Rose, Doctor Strange. Y bueno, recuerden seguirnos en toda esta cobertura en esta semana de este magno evento. Yo soy Pani con imágenes de Yasmín Arias. Recuerden seguirnos en nuestras redes sociales, tanto Instagram como TikTok. Nos vemos hasta la próxima.